Les damos la bienvenida una vez más a The Food Tech Podcast, donde estamos Pablo Silva, Ingrid Cubas, platicando un poquito de las conversaciones que Ingrid pudo tener con muchos de los especialistas que nos acompañaron, algunos speakers muy relevantes, y una de ellas es Julia Collins, la CEO y founder de Planet FWD, una mujer que nos pudo compartir muchísimo de sus experiencias en el escenario del Summit, en la conferencia magistral del primer día, pero también en tu cabina de podcast, Ingrid.
Así es, junto a Edgar Bottle, que también se nos unió en esta charla, pudimos explorar cómo ha sido la trayectoria de Julia para poder compartir sus hallazgos con los especialistas de la industria alimentaria que desean hacer un cambio a favor del cambio climático, ¿no? Como para tratar de revertirlo y también de lograr descarbonizar a la industria.
Vamos a la entrevista.
As a leadership of the topic about climate change related with food, what do you think that are the main things to know about the climate change related with food industry?
Thank you for the question and thank you for having me here. You know, it's often surprising to people to learn that between a quarter and a third of all greenhouse gas emissions globally come from land systems, food systems and land use. We often think about electric vehicles and solar panels and, other interventions as vitally important in terms of working to fight climate change, but so much of the opportunity really comes down to decarbonizing our global food supply chains.
That's really true, and the numbers, I think, they've been shocking. The more we know about the food industry, the more we know its emissions. It continues to be shocking. And now that you were talking about solar panels and other innovations in other industry, which innovations do you think in the food industry will be implemented, short and medium term, to help decarbonize the food chain?
So much great innovation is already happening. We're seeing the growth of plant-based foods as a really exciting category for brands and for consumers. We're seeing new technologies that make it easier to mitigate the methane produced by livestock, using seaweed, for example. We're seeing innovations in agricultural practices, really returning to indigenous wisdom around improving the health of the soil and promoting what we now call regenerative agriculture. What's so exciting about food systems, as opposed to any other consumer system, is that they have the power to not only decarbonize, but actually draw down carbon. And because of where we are in terms of the acceleration of climate change, abatement is not enough. It's not enough to simply stop emitting. We have to address the legacy load of carbon, the trillions of kilograms of carbon dioxide that we have to draw down. And our food systems, in particular, healthy soil, truly have the capacity to do just that.
What will be the main challenges to defeat that thing, to get to change that situation that we have right now ahead?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about some of the barriers to adoption of regenerative and organic agriculture at scale. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone in agriculture who wouldn't agree that improving soil health is good for the bottom line, good for the planet, and good for the customer. But there are often some structural impediments to being able to convert this acreage. For example, in the United States, we have legislation that actually penalizes farmers for changing their farming practices. It can be hard to access crop insurance, a vitally important insurance mechanism to de-risk the proposition of farming. It can be hard to access subsidies and other governmental programs that are designed to support farmers in good years and bad. What I get very excited about is the power of legislation, the power of really strong, smart politicians to make all of this a bit easier. You may have heard a little bit about the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, the IRA as we call it, which is funneling billions of dollars into climate-smart agriculture. We need more of that happening worldwide.
And talking about all the players that can play in this transformation of the industry, you've co-founded Zoom Pizza and now Planet FWD, two startups. And my question would be, how does these kind of platforms like startups can help on the mission of decarbonizing the food systems?
Yeah, I've actually founded 4 food startups. I was a co-founder of a really fantastic fast casual restaurant that's now 12 years old. The way that business can help with decarbonization is thinking about sourcing. How to make sure that you're bringing food into the restaurant that's sourced from farmers who are practicing regenerative and organic agriculture. Businesses in food service can also think about food waste. We know that about 10% of global emissions come just from the food that winds up in the landfill. You imagine the resource intensity of growing a carrot, getting it to market, cooking the carrot, getting it onto your plate, only to have it wind up in the landfill. So reducing food waste is one of the ways that all food service companies can also stand up for climate change. Moonshot, which is a brand that I founded and sold to Patagonia Provisions, was all about scaling regenerative and organic agriculture, and what that meant was paying farmers a premium, rewarding farmers for doing the right things with their soil and their food systems. And so I think no matter where you are in the food value chain, whether you're an eater, an investor, a brand, a retailer, a food service company, even a distributor, you have a role to play. It all comes down to understanding where you are and how to improve.
Yeah, that's the most powerful about it, that everyone has a role on this situation.
Everyone truly does have a role to play. You know, often we look at the statistics around climate anxiety, particularly young people who feel maybe it's just too late. And that's a really scary thing, right? A world without hope is a world that can't move forward. And I think the best way to find that hope is to understand your role and your power. You know, if you have a platform like this, do exactly what you're doing. Bring people on to tell the stories. If you're an influencer, use your platform to highlight incredible solutions that are happening. No matter where you are in the world, whether you're a graphic designer or a cook, there's a part that you have to play. And that is what's so beautiful about food. We all touch food every single day, and so it really is this wonderful medium for connection, for collaboration, and for action.
Yeah, it truly can be scary. But I think, or at least me, when I walking through these expos and seeing all these startup guys with all these new solutions, it's really innovative, like all the, you know, alternative proteins, different solutions that might implement a positive change. So I think also an important point, and I would like to know, like, what do you think about it? How do we get those solutions from startup to a really solution that has an impact in big industries?
Yeah, we talk about this all the time in Silicon Valley, where I'm from, which, you know, is one of the centers of technology innovation around the world. We call this crossing the chasm. How do you go from a great idea to a company that actually can scale? And I think there are a couple of things that are really important. One is a business climate that understands how to support small businesses. This means a big business climate where small businesses can access loans, where they can access markets, where the regulation favors them starting up. It means having capital allocators, whether those are, you know, venture investors or private equity folks, being willing to write checks into innovative solution. One thing that does worry me is that we've seen a little bit of a slowdown in the pace of investment for new food solutions. And we've got to flip that around. We've got to have more money flowing into companies that have the possibility of reimagining our food systems. But the final thing is, every time we go to the grocery store, we have the opportunity to vote with our mouths. And so really one of the best ways to support these brands as they grow and scale is to become a customer. You can become a customer for your home, you can become a customer for your organization, you can become a customer maybe even for your city or your region, but consumers really do have a lot of power, and it's a great thing when you see consumers exercising that power right at the grocery store.
And there it's important to lead them to know what they are buying already, because sometimes they do it in a blind way.
It's true. You know, I believe every single person has the right to be a part of the solution to climate change, and it can start with something as simple as what you choose to eat. But you're so right, you have to have the right information to really understand what you're buying. I love seeing brands like Oatly putting carbon labels on their package. And maybe we don't actually understand what that number means or how to put it in context, but at very minimum, Oatly's starting that conversation with customers and really empowering them with the kind of information that they need to make informed decisions and to make sure that they're making informed choices. But brands really do have a responsibility to be transparent, to be honest, and to really avoid greenwashing. You know, the foundation of any relationship is trust, isn't it? When a consumer buys from a brand, they're buying based on their trust that that brand is going to do what they say they're going to do. And so it's really important when brands are making these messages, whether it's a carbon label or a climate-friendly pledge, that they're doing so from a place of real trust and credibility and transparency.
How can these companies measure correctly these emissions, and how are they impacting the climate, and how to make that something that can be communicated to the customer and is really like well established to be say something?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's exactly why I founded my company, Planet Forward. Planet Forward works with some of the world's most admired brands like Patagonia and Compass to do that measurement, because a brand can't do that itself. The measurement needs to come from a third party, an objective third party. The measurement needs to be done with a methodology that aligns with global standards. That methodology needs to pass all of the regulatory screens that are important. So it really is critical for brands, for retailers, for food service companies to find a trusted partner. That might be a company like Planet Forward, it might be another company, but partnership really is critical to giving brands the tools that they need to be able to credibly message their impact and also understand how to make improvements.
Can you share with us some other examples about that kind of successful collaborations?
Yeah, Planet Forward works with a company called Just Salad. Fantastic salad company. I think there are 100 locations in the United States. Just Salad wanted to do two really important things in the first phase of their sustainability journey. They wanted to, one, understand the carbon footprint of every single item on the menu. And so they worked with Planet Forward to do that life cycle assessment, to measure the carbon footprint of every product. The second thing that they wanted to do was to actually reduce the footprint of some of their products, but they had to understand why. You can imagine if you have 100 locations, thousands of ingredients, it's very challenging to understand where to focus. One area that we highlighted for them was around quinoa. We found that by switching from their conventional quinoa to a regenerative and organic quinoa provided by a company called Simply, they were able to reduce the carbon intensity of that ingredient by 200%. When you multiply that across all of the salads that they made with quinoa in a year, it was like taking 14,000 gas-powered vehicles off the road for a year. When they switched from conventional feta cheese to plant-based feta cheese, a vegan alternative, they reduced the emissions intensity by 82%. So these kinds of swaps can make a really big difference, but you need to have the data first to understand where to focus your energy.
Do you see a clear trend on which types of solutions are being funded?
I mean, I'm going to say something a little bit controversial, but I think OpenAI just raised a $66 billion round, maybe one of the largest rounds in history. I think we're seeing a lot of attention and focus in investing in artificial intelligence. I actually think there's some great applications of artificial intelligence within food. Planet Forward uses AI quite extensively, but where I'm seeing more focus is investors kind of chasing AI as opposed to investing in some of these other industries, and I think that's got to change.
Maybe that will help everyone to get focused on our specific skills and to develop a better products every time.
Yeah, or at a minimum to take a more diversified approach to investing so that we have the right capital flowing into many sectors of the economy. There's no one single solution that is the silver bullet. There's no one company or market that's going to change the world for good for everyone. It takes a diversity of leaders, a diversity of products, a diversity of technologies to move us all forward.
And about the challenges that you told us before, that they have to go deeper in the data to identify the ingredients that they might change in their menus, what is the hardest thing to do about it? Because it's a long way until they think about it and they take action.
One of the most challenging things about understanding your environmental impacts for an ingredient or for a supply chain is transparency and traceability. Often brands are buying from distributors or they're buying from intermediaries, and it can be very challenging to get the data about your specific tomato or your specific pistachio nut. And so one of the foundations of a good sustainability strategy is to improve sustainability in your supply chain. Another challenge is being able to engage with your upstream suppliers and incentivize them to be able to give you data.
Yeah, specifically when you try that they are local products, it's harder to find something that you can trust specifically in your area, and you have to go deeper to try to locate them around.
Yeah, I think there's some instances where investing in a local or a shorter supply chain can be beneficial, not just from a standpoint of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also flavor, also freshness, also price. I think what I get excited about for my customers is when I can find them opportunities to improve their business, improve revenue, reduce costs, reduce risk, and also improve sustainability. And investing in local, organic, regenerative supply chains is one of those areas where often you can find a win-win.
Besides of that, one of the topics that we have discussed in this space during the day, it's about the payment that the farmers receive every time. What can you share with us about that?
Yeah, well, I told you a little bit about Moonshot, which was a brand that I founded back in 2020. At Moonshot, we were very interested in scaling organic and regenerative agriculture. So for our farmers, we paid a premium. We paid a premium to our farmers for the wheat that they were growing in an organic system using regenerative practices. That's one kind of economic incentive for farmers to convert. But that's not the only one. In some cases, government subsidies can play a really important role in scaling the adoption of better practices. I talked a little bit about the IRA. I think there are other examples of government subsidies and programs that can help farmers to subsidize the transition. There are loan instruments and other financial instruments that can be brought to bear to help farmers to finance that cost. You know, transitioning from conventional to organic to regenerative doesn't happen overnight. And there are often cases when a farmer's yields might be lower, or they might experience some depression in output during that transition. So it's a very sensitive time period. It might be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And so being able to use subsidies, to use loans, to use premiums to finance farmers during that time period is one of the ways that we can really make sure that the dollars make sense for the folks who are really growing the food, and that's our farmers.
How do you see the food system in 10 years or 20 years? What will it change? What would you say would be the main differences?
I am an impatient optimist, so I'm going to give you an optimist point of view. I believe that plant-based eating will be the norm for many households in many regions. We'll see more and more families adopting, if not entirely plant-based, maybe 50 or 60%. I think that organic and regenerative agriculture will become a $50 billion industry in North America by that time frame. And I think we really will see the health of our soils and the health of our farmers improving over time.
What do you think is today the main challenge for plant-based foods?
One of the challenges for plant-based foods right now is really cracking the code on flavor. I think deliciousness is a design imperative for food, the same way that beauty is a design imperative for fashion. If it isn't delicious, if it isn't beautiful, the consumer doesn't want to buy it. And so I think the more that we can really take a flavor-first approach to designing plant-forward and plant-based meals, the more that we'll see consumer adoption accelerate.
I think we've also come a long way from 10 years before plant-based until what today it is. So I also think in the future it's going to be a lot better. So.
I agree.
And for the last question, we already know about the thing that makes you turn around to this situation about sustainability and think about climate change because a personal thing that happened in your life. Can you share a little bit of that with us, please?
I appreciate that. You know, I've been working in food tech for about 16 years. I've always been deeply interested in how to use technology to move the industry forward, mostly as a business person, as a scientist. But when I became a mom, it really changed everything for me. And I think so many of us have had the experience of becoming a parent or an aunt or a grandparent, and your life just changes in an instant. You know, and I remember holding my son in my arms for the first time, and I felt so happy and so joyful on the one hand, but I also felt scared. I felt worried. And I just realized that unless I really did everything that I could and I convinced everyone else to work as hard as I was working, he might not be able to go skiing or swim in the ocean or go hiking or do all of these things that were part of my childhood. So it was really a little bit selfish, actually. It was me as a mom wanting to be able to look my son in the eye and say to him, I've done everything that I can to protect this planet for you, and I hope that you'll do the same for your children and the children after you.
Yeah, I don't think that's selfish at all.
I think it's really beautiful and kind. So I think everybody should think that way. So hopefully more people will see it that way in the future. Or in the present, because we do not have a lot more time.
You're right. It's got to start now.
Well, thank you
so much.